everybody. Welcome into the latest episode of the Hey, it's Rico Palazzo Fantasy Baseball Podcast, part of the Roto Fanatic Podcast Network, of course. I'm Uncle Govier, your host for this evening's festivities. At MJ Govier on Twitter is where you can find me. It's a pleasure to have you aboard. We're really excited today. It's just me. No Deary. Deary is recovering. You know, he's getting better, healing up. Got some medical work done today, so he's resting up. I told him I'll handle everything. It's just going to be me and today's guest on the show today. But before I introduce our guest, don't forget that you can follow the show on Twitter at Palazzo Podcast. 2 L's and 2 Z's is how we do it every damn time.
Utah, give me 2.
Palazzo Podcast at protonmail.com is the easiest way to email the show, or you can DM us on Twitter or the Facebook page as well, at Palazzo Podcast, 2 L's, 2 Z's. That's what we got for you. Today's guest is a fine human being, one of the more elite minds in terms of compassion, understanding, and comedy, rolling all of those things into one. It's not easy to do that. Today's guest has all of those and more. So many facets to his personality. He's a big fan of Japan. I know that much. I also know he loves fantasy baseball, and he works at Razzball. You can find his work over there, and you can find him on Twitter because he's everywhere. That's right. It's everywhere. Blair Williams is in the house tonight. I can never keep up with what his latest title is when he changes his name on Twitter, so just call yourself whatever you want, Blair. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me on.
Woohoo! Yeah! Oh, cool. Zytor's here. My guy, Richard Zito. What up, Zytor? My guy. I love Rich. I sent him a t-shirt once. Did you know that?
I think I heard that in your last episode, and it's nice to know. It's nice to know the mail system still works.
It was a while ago, though, so I don't know if it still works. But I'm glad you're here, man. I've been looking forward to meeting you in real life. This is as close as we can get to real life for now. So I've always wondered what you're like, your mannerisms. And we're doing live stream so you can see us. And for those of you that are hearing the podcast version, you can hear us. And what I'm seeing of you, it's about what I expected. You're a pretty handsome dude.
Well, thanks. You know, I'm nearly 40 now, and I'm a little bit older than you. If I remember correctly, I think you're mid-30s or something like that. Yeah. Oh.
I'm 40
yeah,
exactly.
Then,
so.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Are you older
right
than me?
on the button.
Dang.
Maybe.
So I mean,
when's your birthday?
I just turned January 14th, so I just turned 39.
Yes, I'm definitely older than you.
Oh no. Okay. Well. Okay. You're all right. You're older than me, but I appreciate it. We're both quote unquote Midwesterners. We never quite know what the Midwest is called. Just the other day, I saw somebody vouching for our good friend Al Melchior, who lives in Montana, being in the Midwest.
I love Al, but Montana is not in the Midwest. Sorry, Al. I cannot abide by that. No way.
Yeah, he's got to prove it by eating some hot dish. So.
John Fish is in here. I see him. Hey, John, how's it going? There he is. John's checking in. John loves the show. He's always been a big supporter of it. John, I thank you for that. He's definitely in the Midwest because he lives in Wisconsin. That's definitely the Midwest, Blair. No doubt about it.
That's me too. I grew up in Minnesota, 27 years. Moved to Wisconsin 10 years ago. I'm just on the border of the St. Croix River. I mean, you know, my location's in my bio. Everybody's like, I remember the other doc, quote unquote, Mike Carter from your Roto Fanatic shout button. One time asked me where New Richmond is, and I mean, it's basically an exurb of Minneapolis. I grew up in Minneapolis and went to high school, and you know, in the suburbs, and now I'm out in Wisconsin. So definitely Midwest, born and bred. So.
I was born and raised a Michigander myself, and I'm back in Michigan. I always leave this place, and then I come back. It's happened at least 3 times, and for some reason, it just sucks me back in. I don't know why, but that's how it goes. The Green Magna says, is China the Midwest? That's a good question. That's a fair question, Patrick.
Well, you know, in Chinese, you are the central country, so in the way you're the Midwest of, you know, the world.
Hey, all I know is Midwesterners are really the most reasonable and kind people around. They can be a little radical at times as well, but I'm glad that we share that. And I'm glad that I was raised in a place like Michigan, even though it sucks now. I mean, Michigan's gone to hell. It used to be a wonderful state, but it's just not the same anymore. And I've left 3 times, but I always come back. So I don't know what that says about me, but that's how it goes, Blair. I'm just going to be the guy who is going to be like in a love-hate relationship with this state he grew up in. And that's just how it is.
No, I hear that too. And I've left many times and I've come back. And as much as I love Japan, in my previous career, nobody followed me before last year when I came into the fantasy baseball community. And back when I was a Japanese scholar and Midwest still kind of won over Japan. It's where my heart was. It's where my family was. It's where my life is. And here I am. And now I get to do this cool thing called, studying baseball and publishing for all of you. And it's really, honestly, it's kind of took the game that I love to play and turned it not only just to a passion of, how I spend my pastime, but turns it into something that I can share with a much larger audience than what academia provided.
Absolutely. And the fantasy baseball isn't the biggest thing in the world, but you're right. It opens you up to more people. And I think that's cool. That's why I love the community. People say it's very white and male dominated. Those are true points, no doubt about it. But it is open to bringing people in. It really is. It's just a matter of branching out and making sure people understand that from the outside. I really believe that. I think the future is very bright for the fantasy baseball community and those that want to take part in it. I do.
Yeah, and I agree. If anybody remembers, and actually it's kind of, here's a good little segue. It's how Michael and I met in a way. Is last year I published sort of on my own whim this response to Alex Fast, Shout Button.
Booyah!
Who was asking about what do we do with inclusivity in the fantasy baseball community. And I wrote about it from my own experiences being in academia and having a bunch of academic friends who studied sports but didn't always do fantasy sports. And particularly they were concerned about the words ownership and the fact that literally, I've been in leagues since 2001 and they're basically all white dudes. And I wrote that, and Alex actually kind of retweeted it and put it out there. At the same time, you were discussing your return to the game, quote unquote, and that's your story to tell. I don't know if it's tonight or later, but your return to the game, so to speak. And we kind of connected, and you would occasionally tweet out to me. I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm thinking about coming back." And it's like, well, I'm coming out in a way. It's like I've played since 2001, and I was always told to stay off Twitter and stay off the social media for my academic career. My academic career never turned into anything. So it was one of those things that when Alex Fast kind of shot out my article, I got noticed, and finally the community kind of opened up, and I realized that I needed to get off the sidelines and get in the game, and go play center field.
Hell yes, Blair. I'm so down for that. You speak your not your truth. You're just you seem like a very honest guy, like a genuine dude. And not that everybody isn't, but some people are more reserved or they're not willing to express themselves as freely, especially on public forums like Twitter or any other social media. But I feel like I get the real you whenever I engage with you online, and that's not always easy to do. So, shout out to you, my friend. That's why I was drawn to you.
Yeah, and that goes for anybody. It's not what every academic does, because if you're literally in the game, quote unquote, of academia, you're worried about preserving your career because it's under attack right now. But I'm out of the game. I did my best. I spent 10 years, and it's something that nearly tore me apart, and that's for another podcast. But at the same time, I am who I am, and I do my best to. I don't want to say tell it like it is, but I want to make everything productive and build people up as best we can through honesty, because it's the phrase "tell it like it is," is turned into sort of this break it down, awful phrase. But if we can help people be their best selves and be productive and achieve their goals, what more can you ask for out of life than that?
Woo. As a former teacher, I know exactly what you're talking about, Blair. Trust me. I get it. I do. I've been there, and I remember always feeling like I had to be walking on eggshells in any type of public forum, because who knows who would find out if not even things that were controversial in my opinion. I was just being myself, but other people absorb things differently, and they might be like, oh, he's a teacher. He can't be like that. He can't say fuck. Oh, it's like, I don't want to live my life like that. So I was happy to be free of that existence. No more teaching for Mr. Govier, although it was fun, but it takes a toll on your personal life, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, it's I'm an introvert. Believe it or not, I'm a sarcastic introvert, and teaching exhausts you. And I don't want to place my assumptions upon you, but you seem to be a little bit more extroverted. And so as an introvert, teaching exhausted me, and I was just done after teaching. I mean, I loved it, but at the same time, being an introvert, when you're around people, it expends that energy. And especially, I mean, to relate this into fantasy baseball, when you expend that energy and nobody reciprocates, like you write an article and nobody listens, it burns you out over time. And it's one thing when it's fantasy baseball and you're sort of like, oh yeah, I'm making this projection and it doesn't work out. Nobody paid attention anyway. Everybody forgot it. But when you're teaching, like some of these cases, like you're at a liberal arts college and students are paying $50,000 a semester or a year for their tuition, and you're like, and they're not paying attention, they're not reciprocating. You're just sort of like, okay, what's going on with my life? What am I doing wrong? So sort of this transition into fantasy sports is so liberating for me, because now I'm able to take sort of my skills and bring them into a new audience, and hopefully people are enjoying it, and hopefully they're getting something out of it, and hopefully it's being productive in this game that we all love, in this community that we love, and we're able to take it to sort of this new level and evolve. Because ultimately, just to say, like we're all in TGFBI mode right now, right? TGFBI, if anything, is just an evolution of Tout Wars and labor, right? The old world that you're talking about with Jeff Erickson, of the original ways of learning about the expert fantasy baseballers, TGFBI and Razzslam are the new world. And in many ways, we're just kind of at the precipice of this evolution of the community, and we're just kind of waiting for what will be next. And at the same time, we're creating and we're building, and it's exciting. And in many ways, I'm happy to be in the community now officially and helping out in that next stage of where do we go.
I love it, man. Yeah, when you put yourself out there, sometimes people will criticize and say things, but that's what we're doing here. They might say things that you won't want to hear.
We're gonna get all in your face and point out your faults.
Sometimes that happens, so that's the risk we take. Yeah. But hey, I'm glad that we're doing it here, man. I'm glad you're aboard. Today's show, we're going to talk about some fantasy baseball stuff. We'll take a look at spring training, see how that's going. Some interesting developments starting to brew. We'll look at the value zone. We'll get Blair's take on various fantasy thoughts, and we'll shine or ride the pine, do some predictions, of course. And we'll use the RotoFanatic projections that are now available on rotofanatic.com. That's right. Crosby Spencer has worked his ass off, and we have projections available. Go to rotofanatic.com right now. Click on the link on the top that says projections, and you can see them for yourself. They're a little more aggressive than maybe your classic projections are, but that's why I like it, because it's filled with a lot of background research. I mean, we're talking multi-years and data that goes back over the last 3+ from various angles, expected stats that Crosby has created himself. He's a very smart guy. I don't know if anybody knows that or not, but Crosby Spencer is somebody you should be talking to if you're interested in learning more and understanding data, like the details, the nitty-gritty of how data is done in analytics and fantasy baseball. Crosby knows his stuff, and I wouldn't say that if I didn't believe it. I would just kind of never mention him. It would be a lot easier to do that. So I want people to know that, and we hope that you enjoy those. We're doing good stuff at RotoFanatic. You got my shirt on. There it is. RotoFanatic. It's all over this live stream, so it's pretty obvious that RotoFanatic is a part of my life, and I hope you enjoy that. But Blair, you work at Razzball, and Razzball is a really cool place. So Tell us one thing we should know that Razzball does better than anybody else.
I that's a good question because it's not like I'm prepared to say that. So Razzball, in short, was the creation of quote unquote Gray Albright and Rudy Gamble in 2008, perhaps 2009. Yep. They're pseudonyms. They're not real people. Behind the pseudonyms, there are real people. And what is it? 2008, 13 years later, dang. I started reading Razzball in 2009 when I was living in Japan because I had no internet in my Japanese school. And so I would load up the Razzball articles and before I left my house, and I would read them as I got to my school in my free time. And that's kind of where I started to be a Razzball fan. And what they do better than anybody else is, in my opinion, strategy. Because what you're looking at ultimately is Rudy and Gray kind of being the 1A, 1B of the site. And they themselves don't take their rankings all that seriously. But Rudy, if you look at the Tout Wars leaderboard, is 3rd. Gray is, I believe, 28th. And that's when you include historical. There are a lot of people on the Tout Wars leaderboard that aren't playing right now and have stopped playing. So, you can calculate it. Yay! You can calculate it out. But pound for pound, you're looking at two of the best fantasy sports players who are in the business today. And they're actually really low key about it when it comes down to it. So here I am on the Palazzo podcast. It's not like they told me to say, oh, here's what you got to say at the company line. No, I'm making this off the top of my head. I was a fan of Razzball for 10 years. Yes. And when one day I got the note in my DMs from Gray saying, hey, I'm interested in having you come write for my site. It was like a dream come true because finally I went from the anonymous reader. I wasn't even a commenter. Like again, I said, I was trying to stay off of so much social media to kind of hide my academic identity. And suddenly I came out and Gray had no idea I was literally one of the biggest fans of the site. And so for me, it was suddenly the one thing that they do is play really well and teach really well about it. And suddenly it's wow, I'm part of that. That's cool.
You are.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, that's amazing. I'd love to hear that. I think that's really cool, man. I'd never heard of Razzball, and I've been playing fantasy baseball for 20 years, as I like to say, until a couple of years ago. I don't know why they stayed off my radar, but I really like their style. Some people think they're a little too, I don't know, they speak their mind generally. Most of the people at Razzball speak freely, and they're not afraid to kind of go out on a limb, kind of what we were talking about earlier with putting yourself out there in public. And that might rub some people the wrong way, but I don't see it that way. I don't know any of the guys personally besides you either. I'm going to be in the Raz Slam, which was just announced the other day. The leagues are out there. I'm going to be with Gray. So hopefully I'll get a chance to know him a little bit better.
Yeah, you've got a loaded room. I joke that I've got the League of Death. I've got Alex Chamberlain, Derek Rhodes, Howard Bender. I don't want to flip my screen here, but I got a lot of really good fantasy baseballers, so to speak, in my league.
That's you being gobbled up like Pac-Man.
Yeah.
Bad news.
Yeah, and the first time you get the email and you see your league, and I believe Rotowan, who kind of does both Razzball and Fantasy Alarm.
Oh, Alexander. Yeah,
Mike Alexander, Rotowan, was he was the first person to respond to me when I was like, thanks for putting me in the League of Death. And he's like, oh, no, it's not so bad.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
That is great, though, man. I'm so excited. I love Razzslam. I love TGFBI, but I really love Razzslam equally as much, if not even a little bit more, because I like the style. I like best ball, and I love the cut line format. I'm really into it, and I did pretty well with it as a first-timer last year, so I'm very excited for year 2, and I think more people should know about Razzslam because you don't have to do as much work, you know? It's just kind of draft. There's 2 fab runs, right? And that's pretty much it, so.
Yeah, and, I mean, here's my look at the future is I think ultimately within the next year or 2 people are going to combine Labor, Tout Wars, TGFBI, and Razzslam together as sort of the ultimate leaderboard in terms of fantasy play, because as I kind of mentioned before, this is all speculation. It doesn't matter much to me as much, but I know there are people who care deeply about where they rank in the fantasy world, and it creates their identity, and it drives a lot of the business too, is saying like, I'm number 1, this person's number 2, this person's number 3. I wouldn't be surprised if by next year or the year after that we have like this total board of Labor, Tout Wars, Razzslam, TGFBI standings, and then there's like an overall cumulative number 1, 2, 3, and so forth. And that can be a dark total recall future, or it can be a brilliance, eternal sunshine of the spotless mind future where suddenly we're all liberated and like, hey, here's where we're supposed to be. And it's going to be interesting to see what the community does with all that information.
Yeah, that would be cool. I'd be down with that. I don't try to rank myself at all, but maybe I'm not as ego-driven when it comes to fantasy baseball. Clearly, I'm passionate about it, and I enjoy it. I'm putting a lot of my time and effort into it now. Mm-hmm. But in terms of my ranking and stature, whatever. Maybe that's something that comes with like more years of experience in the game with like other elite analysts who start to talk more about that stuff. But I find myself sometimes backing away from some of the aggressive group chatter where people are so focused on every detail that's going on within what analyst is doing what website is doing what. It's a competitive arena, no doubt about it. But I don't ever want to get too caught up in like stature of things. I feel like that would be it doesn't sound like a pleasant future for myself, but rankings are huge. I'm not going to deny that. So I welcome that. If people want, the more clarity we can get on who's the best, because the bottom line does speak for your results. If you're in a league and what you do does dictate kind of what you know over a long period of time, multiple years, right?
Yep.
So if we can get that and get that all kind of collaborated into one with all of these different analyst sectors, then that sounds great. I'd be for that. I think that's a good idea. Maybe you should make that happen, Blair.
No, I'm not a data guy, believe it or not. I'm a community guy, and I'm as it comes down to it, I'm a strategy guy, believe it or not. And as we get into the future part of the podcast, you're going to ask me all these questions about these players, and I'm going to look off to my right here, perhaps the left on your screen, and I'm staring at this ranking of Razzball I have over here, because I'm not that kind of person who's like an autodidact of I like baseball cards. Used to get them in this long tube, and on the podcast form I'm showing like a shape of a rectangle just so you can understand what I'm showing. When you listen to this on the podcast, you get your 780 baseball cards, and you would pull them out and you'd like memorize them as a kid. We're both of the age where we used to do that. It's like I can't do that. Like maybe 10 players, 20 players, 30 players at most on a good year. You're sort of like, oh yeah, I got that person right off the top of my head. And I remember I was listening to your interview with Yancey, and he started like, yeah, I'm just pulling this stuff out of my expletive. And I feel that same way too, is that I'm not a data guy. And when it comes to spreadsheets, like I got my pitcher rankings, and they're what you can get on Fangraphs. But when you're looking at like the deep dives and the people who are scraping data off of websites and producing quote unquote new knowledge, that's not me. And that's sort of like you need to know what you're good at, and they're suddenly transitioning into how do you make yourself a good fantasy baseball analyst. Like, you got to figure out what you're good at, and you got to own it, and you got to know what you're not good at, and make sure that you reference people who do know what they're good at.
Always good to reference people who know their shit. And if you know strategy, then you should focus on that and push it and reference people who do that. You know what I mean?
Strategery.
Yep.
Well, let's get into some of the gratitude that we always do on the show. The show is all about gratitude. We have to give back and say thank you to those that give to us. It does mean something. Some people think it's a scam, it's a joke, it's not true, he's not genuine. Well, I don't give a shit what you think in that arena, because when I play the Belvedere music, that means we say thank you to everybody else. Remember Mr. Belvedere, Blair?
Streaks on the china.
Yeah, I'm old enough to have watched a fair amount of Mr. Belvedere episodes.
He was a reasonable man. But the reason we play the music is to thank you. Thanks to everybody who's been a part of the show this week. And giving thanks means saying thank you to the Roto Brits. They do a great podcast. And it's so cool to have an international connection with people in fantasy baseball. I've always been fascinated by British culture to a certain extent. I don't know why. I'm fascinated by a lot of cultures, but I just love the sound of their voices. Even if it's like the really annoying Cockney ones. I don't know why. I love Guy Ritchie films. I love shit like that. So I'm so glad that I got a chance to connect with Peter and Ryan. Check out Roto Brits. It's a really good podcast. They actually know what they're talking about, too. They're not just like these British guys who are out of touch with American baseball. It's a good pod. Roto Brits. I was on there the other day talking about outfielders. Go check out what I had to say about Kyle Tucker. And I want to say thank you to the guys of the Fantasy Pros podcast, baseball version, Joe Pisapia and Dan Harris. Thanks for having me on. Great podcast. I enjoyed doing the mock draft we did. And you can steal some of my picks if you're in my TGFBI league by looking at the mock draft. And lastly, but definitely not the least, Triple Play. My guys Doc, Lil Cheesecake, and Mendy had me and Deary on. We did all of our TGFBI leagues. We looked at all of our drafts, and we broke down all of them from all of our points of view. So it's very Roto focused. So if you're into Roto strategy and drafting, it's that time of year. It's 2021. It's March. This is a great time to be drafting and getting prepped and focused in on how to draft, what you should do with certain picks, who will be available at what range, so on and so forth. So make sure you check out that podcast. The Triple Play guys are really, really good people as well. And they're funny. They're just funny guys. So go have a good time with them. And I want to say thanks to John Fish. John, you're always here repping the show. Thank you so much, John. You did a great job being on Bubba's podcast the other day. So check out Bench with Bubba with John Fish. It's a really good podcast. And of course, all my Roto Fanatic friends there who are doing wonderful things. Too many to name. Let's keep up the good work and let's keep up all the great times. Man, this is a great, great moment. I'm so happy right now. I'm really enjoying getting to know all these people and these experiences. So thank you to everybody who has given me some of your time. Do not take it lightly. I don't, Blair. I'm not kidding.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
All right. Yeah. Cheers. Woohoo. Yay.
Cheers.
All right. Cheers. Salute. All right. Having said that, let's get into the section we call Leading Off. And today's Leading Off, we'll keep it short and simple here. Just kind of talk about what's going on with spring training, and that's pretty much it. I just want to get Blair's thoughts. Blair, has anything stood out to you since spring training started? Is there a trend that you see developing? Is there a player you're like, whoa, I'm already liking what I'm seeing. I'm raising my interest in this player, or I'm decreasing my interest? We had the Framber Valdez injury, so he broke a finger. Going to be a problem for him. Going to limit his value. What do you think?
That's a good transition. Framber Valdez, he was my starting pitcher number 3 on my TGFBI team. And
Buzzkill.
Immediately after it was announced that he had, immediately after it was announced that he broke his finger, sort of the Razzball Twitter chat broke into this discussion, because what happened, just to kind of give everybody a background, is that Valdez apparently tried to catch a grounder with his throwing hands. He caught it. He continued to pitch, and initially the report is that he had a fractured ring finger, and a fractured ring finger should take within 4 to 6 weeks to heal. But then suddenly he, at least you can update me if I'm wrong here. According to the most recent news update, is that he may need surgery and miss the entire year. And
Framber, what is up with that?
Yeah, so
it doesn't make sense to me.
Sort of the discussion, at least that we're having at Razzball, is that we know, as being a multi-sport, fantasy site, is that we know, for example, Jared Goff, the former quarterback of the Los Angeles Rams, had thumb surgery and was being a quarterback 10 days later. And of course, things are going to be different for pitchers, what with, pitch grips, and our sort of graphic artist Cool Whip went and searched through all the pitch grips, and he's like, yeah, there are a couple of his pitch grips that are ring finger dependent, but it's like 10%. So at first, internally, we're like, okay, we moved him down, I think 125 spots, and then the news came out that he's going to miss the entire season, and they're looking for a second opinion. And I mean, cognitively, as a group, we're sort of saying, like, how can this be? So to sort of transition right there, spring training thoughts: A, yes, he's injured. Hope he does better. B, in terms of fantasy, what I had to do, just to give everybody, like, what is somebody who's semi-competent in fantasy baseball do to recover from basically losing your third starting pitcher? Is I approached it kind of in a psychological way. Is like, okay, I know that at some point in everybody's team, you're going to have somebody who's injured. I'm going to take it into the advantage that I know that Framber is injured right now while I'm still drafting.
Yes.
So what I'm going to do is pivot and change my draft such that I can recover from losing my third starter. And anybody who's vaguely familiar with the Razzball strategy, and we can go into this later, is, of course, that starting pitchers should be drafted later. I was actually slightly ahead of our group in terms of Razzball in drafting my third pitcher with Framber. And what I ended up doing is I took a combination of, I'm just going to click over here, make sure I do not get it wrong. I should frame everybody. I waited until round 4 in TGFBI, 15-team league, to pick Hyunjin
2 catchers.
Ryu. Yeah. Hyunjin Ryu as pitcher number 1. Round 5, Jose Barrios. So I combine those two to take sort of this nice melange of okay strikeouts, nice whip, nice ERA. Framber was supposed to be leading sort of this middle round and allowing me to take more bats. But I had to pivot into what I ultimately did was taking Andrew Haney and Chris Bassett, sort of combining them into, again, sort of this 9K per 9, lowish ERA, lowish whip possibility. Entirely boring, but helpful nonetheless as SP3 and SP4. You then consider Framber Valdez as, like, if he doesn't play, okay, he's gone. And if he does play, you consider him like a sort of a middle reliever, sort of. And you're just sort of like, okay, I made a bad pick early. And there we go. And ultimately,
hold on to your butts.
Yeah, hold on to your butts. And so ultimately, that's what I did with the Framber Valdez news. And whether it works out, we'll find out. But so that's what I did with that. And I think that's probably the biggest news so far. I mean, other than, Wander Franco hitting giant homers. I think we're far enough. Yeah, we're far enough into TGFBI to say Andrew McCutchen looks like a great player.
This is such a crock of shit.
You don't like McCutchen?
Mm-mm.
Oh,
Come on, man. He's past his prime. The party's over, my friend. I love him as a human being. One of the finest human beings ever to don a baseball uniform. No doubt about it, man. But Tearing a knee, getting older, mid-30s, not interested. No DH. That's a bummer. It's a bummer. I don't want to rip on a guy that's such a good person, but we are talking bottom lines. I don't want to be involved with the McCutcheon business in 2021.
Yep. I am not, and I'm probably not going to draft him in Razzslam. I'll just let you know that. But statistics do like him. Projectionists do like him. There are, of course, trade secrets within the Razzball room I can't share, but there are obvious mile-high teams that are interesting. It's no secret to anybody that Rockies are awesome.
The Rockies?
Rockies,
suck,
yeah.
Right?
They're going to suck, but they're useful.
Coors, the banquet beer.
If you draft a Rocky, he's going to hit the ball hard, and it's going to fly a long way. Because when you play it,
Coors,
you're going to be getting a lot of opportunities to crush offensive numbers, no doubt about it. I wouldn't argue that point.
I've written about this before. I personally am enjoying the projections on the Mariners. And I've written already 2 semi-deep pieces on, of course, Marco Gonzalez, about the most boring pitcher you can think of, and Yusei Kikuchi. And already we're seeing, of course, the whole drama around the Mariners. They've already had a full year, and it's the first week of spring training. They've had a full year of drama already. And now we're seeing Jerry Kelenic come up, and do they start him in April? Do they start him in May? He's already been drafted in my TGFBI league. Julio Rodriguez, of course, one of the question marks I had in my sleepers on Gonzalez and Kikuchi is that last year, each of them really struggled with their actual ERA versus FIP, and that was largely defense coming into play. Of course, defense is going to be messed up when Kelenic and Rodriguez eventually show up. They're not going to stay down all year. At what point do they come up, and do they put them in positions that they play defense, or do that they don't play defense, or where do they put him? What do they do? What do they do with Dylan Moore, because he's sort of the utility, the Ben Zobrist player who can go everywhere. So, what do they do with that? And there's so many volatile compounds going on with the Mariners that I'm excited from a fantasy standpoint. Doesn't mean anything from a projectionist standpoint. Like these are my recommendations. No. It's just volatility, and that's what you want, especially if you're one of those people who plays in so many leagues that you want diversity. That you jump into the Mariners and you say, I need a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of Z, call him Z, whatever is the third pronoun of this, that, and Z. That you grab some sort of Mariner combination across your diversification in your platform. So, but ultimately, I'm just happy that we're back in spring training. People are pitching. My local, I don't know if it's national or local, but YouTube TV doesn't basically have anything for me. So I'm catching spring training highlights on Twitter from Pitching Ninja and whoever posts them. So whoever keeps walking that fine line of fair use and copyright, please keep doing it, because us people in the Midwest, we got nothing.
Wow, that was great stuff. Thank you, Blair. The thing about spring training is that some of it's real, some of it's not. And you got to keep an eye on who's getting hurt. Luis Urias left today. He might have a hammy issue of the Brewers. Yep. Keep it little things like that. But then lineups, what's going on with the lineups as well? And who's leading off? Who's batting where? Don't be fooled either when you see an NL lineup. This is key, Blair, because there's no DH, but they're using the DH for NL teams in certain games. So that's not really what we're going to be seeing in regular season. So make sure you're aware of that. Don't assume what you see in an NL lineup with a DH is what you'll get, because you're not getting that in the regular season. So make sure you're focused on the details, but don't fall in love with so we like to do the catch of the day. That's what we do in this segment. We want to point out somebody in spring training who's doing well or had a good day, and it's like, oh, look at that. Wow, it's something to be excited about, and it's fun. So, we do that.
Good. Our first catch of the day.
And today it's Dan Vogelbach. He had a lovely day for the Brewers. He was batting second. He was the DH too, which wouldn't exist in the regular season. Went 2 for 2, scored a couple runs, had a walk. So 3 plate appearances, 3 successive access points granted to the bases. And I got to tell you, I was really bummed when they signed Colton Wong because I knew it was going to be worse for Vogelbach. And this is in deeper leagues. Obviously not so much here, 12 teams leagues, probably 15 team leagues. But I was disappointed because I thought Vogelbach could really crush some bombs there. And in OBP leagues in particular, I always liked Vogelbach because he's got a great eye and he can get on base. Great plate discipline skills, even though he strikes out a ton. True 3 outcome guy. In the end, though, I don't really take stock of what happened here today. I assume you don't either. You're not excited about Dan Vogelbach, right?
I mean, conceptually, yes. Like, I mean, and that's what makes me an awful dynasty player is that I'm that kind of guy. Like, I'll switch to the OPB equivalent of Vogelbach is Robbie Grossman. Like, I was in on Robbie Grossman so early in his career, and he was just completely useless for fantasy up until like last year, basically. And I mean, if we're looking at spring training, the thing is that many of these, especially first week, especially coming off of COVID shortened 60-game season, is where we're looking at managers just trying to see, is their health and fitness. I mean, if we're paying attention to football or soccer, so to speak, they're all paying attention to fitness. How are people showing up in shape to camp? Of course, best shape of our life season is full on right now. And we're hearing all these stories of people in their best shape of their life. And they want to make sure that everybody spent their, sort of COVID 2020 being effective and, taking care of their body. So ultimately, can they stand up and can they relatively make that 162 or 140-ish game season, if you're a rookie? So first and foremost, there's kind of that. Then you sort of see a combination of people showing their new skills, because sometimes, as you pointed out, spring training is this weird thing where the rules are broken. You've got DHs. I'm sorry, I've listened to many of your podcasts recently. I don't know if you said it on yours or with Roto Brits, but like there are spring training games that are just like ending in the middle of the inning. They're ending on inning 7. They're just kind of making it up as they go. So a lot of times you just sort of seeing like, can they perform their skill within a reasonable sort of grouping of sample size? For example, the big news, of course, is Dinelson Lamet. Is his elbow okay? Like the news. I mean, I should say he finished as SP7 last year in fantasy. This is why it matters, because he was really good.
Yeah. But
he also missed the playoffs and the role, and basically as they went through the playoffs, because he had an elbow problem. And he started spring training not throwing his slider. And if he threw 3 sliders or 5 sliders, do we take that as like adjust the rank season? And it's not like spilling any company secrets, but Razzball is not drafting Dinelson Lamet, despite the fact that if you look at his projections, he's very good. Assuming he's healthy, he should produce a very nice number. But the problem is that it looks like with elbow injuries, he's not going to make it. And especially when you've got that deep Padres rotation and you've got prospects lined up ready to take his spot, there's no reason at all that anybody in the front office in the Padres should be like, okay, march yourself out there until you blow out your elbow. So, I mean, so you've seen fitness, you've seen, can they do something in a small sample size? And then of course you're going to see just testing the waters is managers are just going to throw stuff against the wall and see if it sticks, because maybe that small sample size is indicative of a larger skill set that can be replicated into the season. So we can sort of take like hints as fantasy players, like, the hot take with a TAEK to indicate sort of sarcasm right there. We can get excited about this stuff, but you should not necessarily adjust the ranks unless you see a clear assumption of a position as a starter. Perhaps, example is Jordan Hicks, who showed that he's still got 100 plus mile an hour capability. He took 2020 off, especially coming off of Tommy John surgery. It's going to be very hard to deny him a high leverage position in the Cardinals bullpen. Do you take him in the top 10 relievers? No, absolutely not. But you do look at him in that 20th plus reliever range as providing tons of positive potential. I don't want to use expected value, but potential value, because we all sort of imagine this. I'm making this sort of bell curve shape. Where we expect a player to be. Spring training is where you can get those initial hints of the extreme positivity. You shouldn't necessarily expect it, but you can suspect it. And that's where the fun comes into fantasy baseball, because we turn from, sort of understanders into projectors.
Key difference there. I dig that. Suspect. I am suspect of everything. I'm always a skeptic, so that has always served me well, especially in fantasy baseball, because you don't want to get caught up in the hype. Right, Blair?
Hype is fun. Hype drives the commodification of what we do. But at the same time, we wouldn't be human if we didn't hype, right?
I know it's part of being a human being, but it's dangerous ground, man. When some players, like today, another example of a catch of the day, ridiculous. Josh Palacios. Anybody out there been drafting Josh Palacios? I doubt it. But he had a monster day at the plate. He drove in 5 runs. Looks amazing for one day. And that's hype. So people say, woohoo, let's get hype. But he plays for Toronto, and they're loaded. So the reality is not going to match the hype. But, if you want to hype him, go to town. Have at it.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm not going to hype him.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. I was just double checking. So I didn't think you would, but that's just an example.
All the way.
Yeah. Yep. Teoscar Hernandez getting demoted for Josh Palacios. Stay tuned. No, that probably won't happen. But,
Good. Our first catch of the day.
There's always somebody who's going to stand out every day in spring training. So just enjoy for what it is and give that kid credit, because usually it's a youngster. It might even be a veteran, too, an old guy who's been around trying to make that last. Scott Kazmir is in camp. He was signed. He's on a non-roster invitee deal with the Giants, I think. And so he's, you never know. These stories do happen, and people start making moves and surprise you, and they might give you a roster spot based on a great spring. But will it last? That's why you want to pump the brakes on hype. That's my opinion. But, Blair, as you said, hype is human. To be human is to hype, and I have no beef with that.
To be human is to hype, and if you're the fantasy manager that likes prospects, if you're the person who already is drafting or wants to draft, say, Jared Kelenic or whatever, Mackenzie Gore, you're going to need the Scott Kazmirs to get you through April. Because ultimately that's what the veterans are there for, is to keep the prospects down for a month, 2 months, whatever. We're in COVID season now. Who knows what happens anymore? But the supreme veterans who shouldn't, that's a very loaded word, shouldn't be on a roster, who non-logically occupy a spot on the roster, are there to suppress service time, can nonetheless be useful in April when, pitchers are still warming up, when hitters are still cold.
Yep.
And you're last, and you drafted Framber Valdez as your SP3.
These things happen. It's part of the process. You're fortunate, Blair, at least that you were slow drafting, so you could try to adjust your roster on the fly. If you're doing a real-time 1-minute clock draft and you drafted Framber Valdez, the party was over before you knew it.
Yeah, and that's there's this image that our graphic designer Cool Whip always puts. It's SpongeBob SquarePants making a rainbow with his hands. And says you could use that time to make a better roster and think more about your research. And that's what you got to do if you're in a slow draft and it's going slow, is take your moments of tilting and turn them into moments of advantage, because time's the most precious thing we have. And if you can turn it from frustration into productivity, there's nothing better.
Amen, brother. Amen. All right, there it is. A little bit of spring training analysis. Take it for what it is. We don't know everything. We don't know what's going to happen, but we try to give you guys some data here on the Hans Rico Palazzo Fantasy Baseball Podcast. We are on Twitter, of course, Palazzo Podcast, 2 L's, 2 Z's.
Utah.
Palazzo Podcast at protonmail.com. Send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget the Palazzo Invitational is still open. The fourth league. Pretty good. It's an NFBC league created specifically for us. So if we can fill up those final spots, there's about 5 or 6 spots left in League 4. And once that is filled, the draft will commence. $50. It's a 50-round draft and hold. That's what it is. So you don't have to do a lot of in-season management. Just draft. And then when that's done, it's done. It's a 2-hour clock, too, so it's slow draft. You'll have plenty of time to go over your picks and delay your picks if you're waiting on spring training outcomes, which some people do, and there's arguments about whether that's cool or not. But, hey, that's not what I'm here for. In the end, we would love to have you guys aboard, and whoever wins the overall of the 4 leagues will get a big-ass trophy. And who doesn't want a big-ass trophy? And plus, there's money involved, too, so you can have it all. You can have your cake and eat it, too. Go to the link on our Twitter bio. It's right there at the top of the Palazzo Podcast, 2 L's, 2 Z's, and sign up.
Give me 2.
You could do it right at this moment you're hearing this in real time. You could pause the show if you're listening to the podcast version, sign up right now. Or continue to listen while you're signing up, typing in the link, going to their Twitter bio, Palazzo Podcast, 2 L's, 2 Z's. Do it. It's going to be worth it. Trust me. All right, let's have some fun now, because we've not been having quite enough fun just yet. It's time to go into Rico's Inquisition. Blair, are you ready for this?
I'm absolutely ready. I seeded my Twitter timeline with things, hoping you would ask me things.
Oh, well then, you are a wise man. You've been paying attention. Here we go. Would you prefer to deal with a manipulative person or a callous person?
Wow, this is deep into my psyche.
Alan Trammell or Lou Whitaker?
Oh, I knew you were going to hit me with that.
The 1988 Dodgers or the 2020 Dodgers?
Oh, the 1988, by far. It was the happiest moment of my sports life. That was my first gut moment.
Nelly, get ready for some doozies, because it's time for everybody's favorite part of the show, Enrico's Inquisition.
Yes, if you've never listened to the show before, this is where we ask questions, we put scenarios to the guest, we just throw things at a wall, and we hope that they stick. And that's how it works. If you've heard the show before, then you know how this segment works. Blair Williams is joining us here. He's from Razzball. He's a very wise man. You can follow him on Twitter anytime you want to at, what is it, Everywhere Blair? Yeah, that's what I thought it was. God,
Everywhere Blair.
Everywhere Blair. Follow him. He's a good follow. So if you've seeded your Twitter with some, nuggets, then this will work out well. I'm actually really impressed that you did that, because let's probably do most of my research on this segment. I'm not going to lie about it, because that's what Twitter is. It's a permanent record of our tastes, our desires, our idiosyncrasies, if you will.
Our bad jokes.
Or just terrible, god-awful jokes. Yes, that is true. There's no doubt about it. So let's start with an easy one. Bill Hader or Phil Hartman?
The child in me says Phil Hartman. But believe it or not, as much as I use the Stefan gifts, I do not study the comedy of Bill Hader very much. So if I have to choose, I'm going Phil Hartman.
Man, I'm so glad I'm not you. I'm glad I'm not you, because I don't have to make that choice. That is a difficult choice. They're so talented, both of them. Both of them are just probably Probably in the top 5. I might put both of them in the top 5 all time for my like SNL, Mount Rushmore or whatever, or the top 4 or whatever. I think I probably might do that.
Yeah. And I see Carlos is shouting out Phil right now. And
yeah.
I mean, absolutely. When you go back to whether it be News Radio, Simpsons, I mean, so many things I can't even name. I'm not, I mean, I work for Gray, who's literally a comedian. It's like my knowledge of comedy is like a grain of rice compared to him. It's like I'm just a bad guy, bad at sarcasm, and it's like there are people who know comedy inside out. It's like for me, yeah, Phil Hartman. I saw him on TV. There we go. Yep.
Man, I'm wondering, how is it being in the league with Danielle? You know, Danielle Salinger is a friend of mine. I'm a big fan of hers. I love what she does. You know, Justin Mason's wife is how some of you may know her, but she's her own person. She's Mrs. D on Twitter, Danielle Salinger. What's it like being in the TGFBI draft with her? Any comments? Anything that you could share with us?
So just to give everybody some context, she is also creating, I believe, a blog and even doing some podcasts about learning how to play fantasy baseball.
Yeah.
And in terms of fantasy sports, I do baseball, football, and basketball. I think baseball is the hardest to learn. And not only the hardest to learn, but the hardest to do well at, because fantasy football, the rosters are much smaller. Fantasy basketball, the quote unquote stars and scrubs is much more important. So if you get your stars right, your scrubs are less important. But baseball, you have to get a lot of things right, and the rosters are bigger, and particularly the community is much more intense in terms of data. Football is much more virulent in terms of just sheer anger. But baseball sort of has this ivory tower complex going on. And so what Danielle's been kind of doing is her quote-unquote outsider experience coming into fantasy baseball. And I don't want to speak for her. Of course, you should probably bring her on the podcast. But from my experience with her, because I've interacted with her on Twitter, and of course we have our TGFBI group chat is named Memers and Dreamers, because that's basically who we are. Is, you know, we've got Andrew Cooper, Coupe Fiasco from Fantasy Alarm, and I mean, I can't go without mentioning Hall of Famer Todd Zola. Can't go without mentioning Draft Cheats, Eric Segrist. But ultimately, we're kind of this. We're the last league. We're League 29 of 29, and we're the league that is hosting Danielle. And I don't think there could be a better league to be around her. And I was super, super excited when I learned not only that I was in her league, but I'm drafting next to her. And so I'm 6th, she's 7th. And so basically, I got to snipe her in round 1, and she gets to snipe me in every single other round. And she does her research, and in the group chat, she explains, like, oh yeah, I've got to put the kid down. I'm going to make my choice in the next hour because I'm researching it, and I'm going to tell you exactly who I'm taking. And it's great. So it's really empowering to see somebody who kind of wants to see this aspect of, of fantasy baseball, and not only sort of do it performatively, like anybody can just show up and click on the next person in the queue. And I, to be fair, there are people who do that in ESPN and Yahoo leagues. They just take whoever's next in the queue, whatever the ranking says, they just take that. She's not doing that. She's doing the quote unquote hard mode of doing the legwork of research, drafting, and mean, she's also, of course, working 2 jobs and taking care of the kids and all these other things all at the same time. And she's really quite the hero for it. So everybody go give her a high five on the internet. Stay away from her, until COVID's done. But give her the biggest respect and biggest thanks. And what she does with her blog and future podcasts, share them all around the world.
Beautiful. Yeah, she's a friend of the show here, so you can speak for her freely. She won't care. Trust me. I got no doubts about that at all. We love you, Danielle, and you can check out her pods. I wrote the theme song for her pods that she does with the TGFBI feed, the TGFBI podcast feed. She pops in with Learning Baseball with Danielle. Check it out if you want to get back to basics and really remember what it was like to start from the beginning, because some of us forget that. She's doing a really good job of doing that. I did it myself, and many, many other luminaries more famous and cooler than I'll ever be have already done that with Justin Mason and her as well. So it's a real cool format, and I'm glad she got involved. She was already a part of the community. She just made it official by finally starting to play fantasy baseball. We're talking with Blair here, Blair Williams from Razzball, and we're doing a little bit of Enrico's Inquisition. And the next one is No Effects or Bad Religion.
I've got a weak spot for NoFX and The Decline. I mean, it was a 20+ minute punk song.
It is.
Yeah. It takes me way back because I tried to seed with Strung Out, and I was hoping you were gonna go with Strung Out, but NoFX.
Oh.
Yeah. They're sort of contemporaries right there, sort of that.
Sure.
"Quote unquote California." I mean, Strung Out was California. I can't remember NoFX off the top of my brain where they come from.
Definitely California. All those get Bad Religion, NoFX, all that SoCal new school punk.
Fat Mike and Fat Wreck, right?
Fat Mike and El Jefe was the other main guy. Yeah.
Well, Fat Wreck Records, correct?
Oh, Fat Wreck. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Fat Wreck.
Okay,
he founded Fat Wreck. Strung Out was on Fat Records. Other bands that were on Fat Wreck, absolutely. And that's so cool because Bad Religion is they're like statesmen of old punk rock, and they also stayed around so long. They're still around to this day, just like NoFX. And that's why I asked that one. Strung Out was I love Strung Out. I've seen them, I don't know, 5 or 6 times, and I love them. I always did, but I guess I just wanted to know between those two, because they've pretty much made themselves in terms of 80s, 90s and punk rock. They were the kings of punk rock for the time.
Yeah, I think NoFX was a little bit more willing to break the mold. They're all sort of pop punk, but
yeah,
of those two, NoFX.
Well, Bad Religion took a major deal, and NoFX never did. And apparently that was like a big faux pas, because Bad Religion sold out in the late 90s, because they had Epitaph Records, which was run by, Brett Gurewitz, who was their founding guitarist. They did this song on the one album they did. I don't know if it was 1 or 2, but they did at least one album on the major label, whatever the fuck it was. I don't care what it is. The song was so terrible. It was called Fa 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 Fa. It was called Fa 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 Fa. Raise your voice. It was just so lame. It was not the kind of Bad Religion I was feeling. But they got back to basics, and they've still had an incredible career. So it was terrible. Oh God. I'm thinking about that.
I remember it was a cold ass. It was like February or March. Again, Minnesota. I saw Strung Out, and I was there for a friend, and I had heard Matchbook, which is like Strung Out's most famous song, and that was basically it. And we were front row center. We were the first people in line. We were there 2 hours before the next person at the Quest in Minneapolis. And I was just vaguely slightly taller than my friend. And so the Strung Out frontman kept putting the microphone in my face. And I had no idea what the lyrics were to any of his songs. And my friend who was right next to me, you're crammed together. I mean, this is a small club, would just keep reaching over, I'm shoving my head off camera. And he would keep reaching over, trying to sing the songs. He loves Strung Out so much. He Strung Out's symbol was an atom, basically like a proton, neutron with electrons going around it. He had it tattooed on his heart. I mean, that's how much he loved Strung Out. And the lead singer of Strung Out kept putting the microphone in front of my face, and I was like, I don't know the lyrics. I kept pointing over and was like, you got to get my friend. Him.
Shit! Wow, God, that takes me back. I was such a Strung Out fan. And you're right. If you've never heard the song Matchbook by Strung Out, stop what you're doing right now. Go listen to it. Go to your Spotify, your Apple, whatever the hell you use to listen to music these days. CDs, even if they're out there. Go find that song. Go on YouTube and find Matchbook. It's a great song. Strung Out at their best. It was like everything. When we were younger, it meant everything. It was such a unifying and bonding song to our group of friends, and it was like a rallying cry. It was beyond an anthem. It just spoke to us at a certain time and a certain place in life where it all just kind of meshed together, like flawlessly, regardless of who we were, what we stood for. It was a great song, and it still is a great song. It's a classic. So check it out and thank me later. Matchbook by Strung Out. Good call, Blair. I'm glad you brought that up. Really glad you brought that up. What about Wham, though? Are you a big Wham fan? Because do you prefer George Michael? Do you prefer George Michael, or are you more of a... I struggle to find a comparison to this one, but I thought about it for a while, and after some deep thought about who George Michael is and what he stood for, I decided to put him up against Whitney Houston. So Whitney Houston or George Michael?
George Michael, 100%.
Really?
I mean, so there's if you look real hard, you can find a video of me, of course, on YouTube playing, to some of these songs. But George Michael, to this day, I mean, I posted on Facebook. I don't think I posted on Twitter, but Last Christmas is, I kid you not, the best Christmas song ever. George Michael was a phenomenal vocalist. He was, so many things that, we all kind of know that when you sign up, especially in the 80s, especially in the 90s, for the major label records, that you're selling out. And this is not to take away from the amazing skills of Whitney Houston, but sort of the range of male singers in the 80s and 90s, that torch that Freddie Mercury had kind of handed off because of his physical decline, suffering from AIDS. George Michael took that up. You could see that in many of the duets he did with Elton John and other things like that. He was a phenomenal vocalist. And not only that, but in terms of his social activism, and ultimately he kind of disappeared from social life in the 2000s because in the 90s he had a run-in in a random park where pre-Tinder he ended up trying to date solicit a cop ultimately. I remember that. And it just kind of ruined his career. And on the spectrum of things that we can look at, of vices that you can do, this incredibly minor vice that so many people were doing with aplomb and celebrating even, there are fetishes around this. George Michael, for whatever reason, got caught, and ultimately kind of his career sacrificed around that. And again, it takes nothing away from Whitney Houston, but for me, especially having so many GLBT friends, George Michael was such an icon to them, and I know how much they meant to him, that George Michael wins that competition.
George Michael, so underrated. I agree with you. I love Whitney Houston too, but George Michael, God, such a great artist. He's a real talent, and I'm really sad that his life was cut short the way it was. But he lived a hell of a life. He lived more of a life than you and I have ever lived in our lives, Blair, in his own time frame. Trust
me.
Oh, we miss him. What about sliders or curveballs, though? Which one do you prefer?
if you're watching GIFs, sliders, because sliders like, can have like this infinite capability of just moving. Curveballs, quote unquote, 12 to 6. It's like, okay, that's still a limited range. Sliders, I mean, you can watch sliders, end up in the dugout. And
The TV show?
yeah, the TV show with
Jerry O'Connell.
Yeah, Jerry O'Connell, that's the name. Oh, I've seen it all, but I mean, you can watch a good slider end up in the dugout. A curveball ends up in the dirt. And if you're swinging at a curveball in the dirt, that's your own problem. If you throw a slider that ends up in the dugout, wow, that gets me every time.
Tell me one thing. I never visited Japan. What is one thing I should know about Japan? Not something generic that you could look up and Google. What's something that I should know about Japan if I ever go there one day?
One thing that you should know about Japan, that puts me on the spot, I would say
It does.
is the openness and humanity of the people. And I say this in the context that they're people that was basically decimated following World War II and imperialized in the American. They were developed as a bulwark of American capitalism following World War II. And in many places in America, you can travel right now and you're met with absolute suspicion. And I say this as basically a white Midwesterner who has every privilege. And if I travel, like, you're still sort of like, people watch you and they're like, oh, I don't trust you. But when you go to Japan, almost without exception, you will be met with, at least at the very minimal, sort of this friendly tolerance, if not open arms. And of course it comes with caveats because Japan still hasn't had a women's right movement. There's still lots of racism in Japan, but I've seen, not only to my closest friends who come from all genders, sexualities, races, that the most humble Japanese person will go out of their way to help you, especially if you are ready to reciprocate. And I sort of, again, I come at this from an academic point of view, is that I'm hedging my words right here, is that I want to give an example. Is I lived in Shikoku, which was the fourth island of mainland Japan. If you look at a map of Japan, it's the small little island just south of Osaka and Kobe. And I lived technically what was the town of Takamatsu, but Takamatsu was a lot like Chicago in that it just annexed everything. So Takamatsu was huge and had these ultra rural, undeveloped corners. Shikoku was also part of what was called an 88 temple pilgrimage, and that they had all these temples that you would, in theory, move around. You're supposed to visit 88 of them, and you get your little stamp in a book. I only got to like 30 of them, but there was a time where I was transiting between these temples, and an older Japanese couple saw me and they said, hey, are you doing this pilgrimage? And I said, yep, this is kind of what I do in my free time. I try and explore and learn about your culture. And they said, okay, we're going to drive you to the next one. And, I was 27 at the time, white dude. If you can't see me, if you're listening to the podcast, I'm as Midwestern typical white as you get. I was vegetarian at the time, so a lot thinner. And they packed me up in their car and drove me off, to the next temple, which saved me 4 hours of transit time, using trains. And they had no idea who I was. I spoke limited Japanese. I was, this I think my 4th month in Japan. My Japanese was awful, and they packed me up and they took me to the next spot and brought me there. And that's just one of many, 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 many examples of just showing the hospitality and the humanity of the Japanese people. And I can't say enough if you go to Japan, you will be helped. So many people from America, Canada, Latin America are so afraid of the language barrier. If you go to Japan, they will help you. Go to Yokohama, go to Osaka. Those places are, Yokohama is probably my favorite place in the world. I mean, it's breathtaking, and there are just experiences that are indescribable, and your love of humanity is just doubled, tripled, exponential when you go there.
Beautiful. Wow, Blair, thank you for sharing that. That is why we do this show. See, I just learned some stuff. I absorbed it, and it was said with such genuine, authentic recall, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Blair. Thank you so much. That's great. That's great stuff. God, I would never been to Japan once in my life, and I would really like to go someday. And it's definitely up on the list once COVID ends and my life can go back to normal and I can commence the travel that I have so desperately failed to do enough of in my life. Not because of any particular reason, just, you know, life happens. Money, all opportunities. You can't just travel on a whim necessarily. I mean, I guess you could, but it's just, there's a lot of factors that can come into play that prevent people from traveling.
I was, believe it or not, when COVID first struck in China, ticket prices to Japan plummeted, and I had 2 tickets for March 2020 to go to Japan because they were the lowest price they had ever been. And so my wife and I were going to go because at that time there was still a lot of misinformation about the coronavirus that was coming about. And it turns out that not only China, but Japan and the United States were all kind of hiding the fact that this is an incredibly virulent disease. And so I remember basically 1 year ago, March 5th, I mean, I was supposed to go, I think, March 16th, 2020. So at this point, nearly a year ago, I was supposed to be going back to Japan for the first time in 5 years. My best friend lives in Yokohama, and, you know, I was so excited to see him. And unfortunately, I have to wait longer. And, you know, fortunately, there's what we call, of course, rain checks. So we've got, you know, a lot of rain checks with Delta Airlines. And hopefully when COVID is solved, or, you know, at least mitigated, I should say, I can go back and see my best friends and experience Japan again.
Fabulous. You know, some people don't get to travel because of financial reasons, others because of responsibilities, so on and so forth. Excuses pile up, legitimate reasons pile up, and people have a hard time changing their ways. And next thing you know, your whole lifetime goes by and you miss out on so much. This world is massive. It's not small. Even though the world is small in terms of the overall size of the universe and the galaxy and all that stuff, it's still a big place. And there's so many great people to meet and cultures to experience and different ways of how people do things. I look forward to that. I always do. But some people say, you know what,
And you want me to change?
They don't want to change. So it's up to them to do so. But you can travel. You can make it a priority. Once COVID ends, of course. I mean that very sincerely. But you can make it happen. Don't limit yourself. That's my little plea to you out there in Palazzo land or wherever the hell you are. This is the Hayes Rico Palazzo Fantasy Baseball Podcast. We're talking with Blair Williams from Razzball, and Blair is in Rico's Inquisition. We're going to wrap this segment up so we can move on from it, but I got to ask, bass or drums?
Drums, 100%. I don't know if you saw me. I got in a discussion with one of my Twitter friends about bass being the instrument that whoever's worst at guitar takes up in the band. I mean,
That's so true.
To give your listeners background, I know you just talked to Yancey, who was apparently a very skilled drummer, and then I think
he was like in Drumline and shit. It was
and then there's like you and me who are like, musicians who are like do everything. Like I play guitar. The answer is my basic guitar setting is open C. There you go. That's all you need to know about me. I play my guitar in open C. But drums, I played starting, I think, age 13. And I got up to like university jazz band. And I failed. I was in university jazz band for a year, and I failed out of it because I discovered punk music. That was the year that I learned about, Strung Out and NoFX and all these other things. And I went into my jazz audition for the second year, and it was just awful because I was just banging. But like drums, I get it from the musician standpoint. Like if you're thinking about jazz and you're listening to like the Aristocrats, which is not only a bad joke but like a good jazz band too. If you're listening to an authentic good bass player, yeah, I get it. And I should say, as a guy who loves music, the first thing I do when I get a new pair of headphones is fix the bass, because that makes the music. But as a musician, if you have a bad drummer, your album is toast. If you have a bad bass player, you're probably just a standard rock band. I mean, let's be fair. As I grew up, I was a huge fan of the Smashing Pumpkins. Just, roots and fives, the basic bass notes that you could play in the Smashing Pumpkins led to, one of the biggest bands of the 90s.
Yep. Darcy.
Yep. And it was backed by, of course, Jimmy Chamberlain, one of the most fantastic drummers of the 90s. But of course, the best drummers are the ones you don't even notice, because they're playing exquisitely, and they're playing in a manner that you don't necessarily hear, but you feel. And when you feel a drummer doing the wrong beat, you know it.
You do. Yep. As a guy who's played bass and drums, yes, I understand exactly what you mean. There's also a kinship, though, between bass and drums, in my opinion, because they are the rhythm most of the time. And if you get two that understand each other, you can really make not elite music, but like really crafted, well done, technical, and beautiful music when a bassist and a drummer combine to like get on the same page and just start on their own flow.
Yeah, I mean, they're absolutely tied together. I mean, the first lesson of any band is the drummer follows the bass, right? Yep. And if you're not following the bass, you're creating dissonance. If the bass player is just rooting and fiving and occasionally putting in the third to make the major chord, it's super easy. The drummer just kind of thumps on the bass drum, plays 2 and 4, and is done with it. When things get messy and you start getting into quote unquote prog rock, that's when things get interesting. And especially like, I think the most low key progressive music right now is, the YouTube lo-fi hip hop channel.
Really?
Yeah, because you got this quote unquote instrumental hip hop, which oftentimes is based on jazz bass, but simple hip hop like Casio beats, boom, ch, boom, ch, and because that's supposed to calm you, and it's supposed to like touch this part of your brain that just calms you and sets you on ease, but at the same time you sort of hear this lively bass. When done properly, of course, I think bass can, of course, supersede the drums. But I think in the majority commodified music world, 100% drums beat the bass.
There it is. There it is. I just found out about something I didn't even know what it was. Lo-fi hip-hop. I'm going to have to check that out now. Gosh, you think you know a lot about music, and then you find there's more and more and more and more and more. So I can dig that. Thank you. You're giving me more to build upon. And as a drummer who's played, I played a fair amount of years. I love the drums, and I love playing bass. They really are my two passions. I could play guitar, but like you said, I don't play guitar well enough to be the guitarist in the band. That's why I would be the bassist. And I also just liked it. I just love playing bass. When I sing and play bass together, those are great combos. I feel like I'm a part of the whole thing, and I don't know. It's hard to describe sometimes. I love the drums, but the bass has really grown on me tremendously in the last 10 to 15 years. It's just so vital to enjoyable music, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, just to tie things back, like in my last class I taught, I asked my students, I should say I was teaching about Japan. I asked my students, create your own final basically. And somebody wanted to write about a Japanese song, and he's writing about the key of C and stuff like that. And a lot of people don't realize that C, when you're playing music, is if you're looking at a piano, it's all the white keys. You don't need to touch any of the black keys to play in the key of C. And it's simple, but it also has this resonance between C and G. The first and the fifth, the C and the G, and which is why I choose that for playing guitar as well, because you can CG, I should say, your tuning is CG, 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 E. I might have done an extra CG there, but the point is that you are doing these chords that, or I should say, notes that resonate with each other and build off each other, and C and G are unlike basically any other notes than when they're heard by the human ear, and they just resonate with us not only acoustically, but they do at a deeper level in terms of your brain. And ultimately, when you hear those notes, you hear them in the music of Devin Townsend, you hear them in why am I blanking? Robert Fripp. He's that guy who Tool emulates. Of
Tool
course,
emulates.
it's right when of course, right when I'm on the podcast, I blank. King
It's
Crimson,
okay.
there we go. King Crimson, new standard tuning, there we go. But you sort of you can bend your instruments in so many different ways. You can tune your drums in so many different ways. That it's not just quote unquote music like you record it, and it's not to take anything away from just like recording something. Like you said, you recorded something for Danielle's, but like when you not only record something but like touch somebody beyond their frontal cortex, like deep down into their brain, something primal, it changes them.
It does. That's the power of music. That's why COVID sucks. Another reason COVID sucks. I love playing with people. I love connecting with people in real time. It's great. John Fish hitting the road. See you, John. Bye, John. Always a pleasure to have you around, John. That's why COVID has taken more from us, because I could be playing every week with friends of mine, and I can't do a Zoom jam. I'm not going to do one of these Zoom jams that I saw were popular for a minute, like when the Rolling Stones, they all play together on Zoom. I mean, that sounds, I don't know. It doesn't sound the same to me, but that's my opinion. There's nothing like when you're in person with people and you're grooving and you don't know what they're going to do necessarily. You're learning songs. And I'm talking about creating music too, like not cover songs and things like that. When you jam, as they say, that's quite an experience, man. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, the first time I learned the blues was honestly in a Japanese bar.
Oh, really?
So, I mean, here's I know we got to get to the next topic, and Brock is sitting here.
What's our band's name, by the way? Yeah, he wants.
We're gonna call it, the 2 L's, 2 Z's, 2 P's, 2 A's.
We'll call it the Blair Mike Project.
Blair Mike Project. So in Japan, the trains stop going at midnight, which is close enough to now. If you do not make it to the train at midnight, you got to stay out all night or pay $100, $200 for the taxi. So one of the times I was there doing my research for my book, Making Japan's National Game, I was out at this bar, and I was there with a friend. A lot of L's, but I will allow it. Thanks, Brock. I was out at this bar with a friend, and of course we missed last train, so we had to stay out, and we go to a British bar, and there's a Japanese guy who brought his guitar, and we had known we were going to play, and so we had practiced a couple propaganda songs of all things that we were going to play. And a couple drinks in, this Japanese guy comes over to me with his guitar, and he's like, "Do you know the blues?" I'm like, I don't know the blues. Look at me. And he's like, "I'm going to teach you the blues." And it's 1 a.m. in the middle of like a Japanese, Tokyo suburb, Saitama. And that's where I learned the blues. It was literally in a Tokyo suburb. And so, I mean, ultimately, the whole thing we're talking about here, whether it be fantasy baseball or music, is that we have these human experiences, not just, talking about stats, but talking about what makes us, people with hearts that beat and get excited and stuff like that.
Sure.
And baseball is just the thing that starts the conversation and gets things rolling.
Well said. Yes. Blair did write a book. I'm so glad you brought that up. We should have been mentioning that at the beginning, Blair. Come on, you got to promote yourself better. Remind people again where they can find your book.
You got to remember, I'm an academic. The reason that I'm even here in the first place is because I can't promote myself. Yes.
Forgot about that. Yeah.
I'm technically Dr. Blair Williams, quote unquote PhD. Graduated 2018 from University of Minnesota. Master's from Ohio State. But you can get my book, Making Japan's National Game: A Cultural History of Baseball in Japan, either from Amazon. You can search that name right there. Again, Making Japan's National Game. Or if you find me on Everywhere Blair at Twitter, I have it as my link in my bio, straight from the publisher. In theory, we're supposed to have it on bookshop.org for all you independent bookshop shoppers. It should be out there eventually, but Amazon gets priority, so that's where it is.
Making Japan's National Game, a book by Dr. Blair Williams. Do not miss this wonderful book. You're listening to NPR. I'm Terry Gross. No, we're not going to do that. But seriously, go buy Blair's book. Guy loves baseball, and he knows baseball, and he knows Japan pretty well. He's got a lot of experience with the two, so I figure there's going to be some value there. I have not bought your book, so I'm an asshole right now. I should buy your book.
That's okay.
I'm telling people to buy it.
I haven't bought it either. I just got a free shipment, so... but it's one of those things. Like it took me 8 years of writing and lots of sacrifice and all the shebang. And you can bring me on your other pod, and I'll talk all about it. But honestly, for the takeaway for fantasy baseball listeners right now who have been so patient listening through my talk of NoFX and propaganda and things to listen to when you go to Japan is. The valuation of people coming from Korea and Japan is not nearly as effective as you think it is, because ultimately a 27-year-old coming from Korea is not being valued the same as an 18-year-old from whatever, Arkansas, because the 18-year-old will work for basically nothing, and the 27-year-old from Korea is going to work for several $1 million a year. There's always that bias when people are like, oh yeah, what, Ha-seong Kim is coming over this year from Korea. It's awful for me to be put on the spot. I don't know the Japanese players who came over.
Kohei Arihara, the Texas Rangers. I'm excited about him, actually. So.
Yeah, it's one of those things like, when you look at the spectrum of the Japanese players who have come over, and I come from this from a historical perspective, is that the majority of them, the bulk of them, have not performed well, but those who do perform well, which is the exact statement that I can make of any minor leaguer. You can name any random.
Yes.
I mean, I think there's 40 Japanese people have come over. You can say that about any minor leaguer that, here. There's a fine troll on Twitter who loves Wander Javier of the Minnesota Twins. I'm going to get quote tweets about this. Wander Javier cost the Twins $4 million in 2015 or 2016 to sign. I don't think he's broken the top 30 prospects on the Twins. And at the same draft class produced Juan Soto. I mean, you don't even need to name anybody else.
No, that's it.
Fernando Tatis. The Twins could have had all these players.
I still hear people talk about Wander Javier like it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. So
yeah, it's gonna happen. Yeah, I think he hit like 190 or something in his last year. So, yeah. So it's one of those things that when we apply that to Korea and we apply that to Japan, it's the same metrics and the same likelihood that they're going to succeed. But oftentimes they want to succeed for more money than, say, somebody from the Dominican Republic or somebody from Arkansas will play for, and so it doesn't work out necessarily. And we read that in the wrong way, and that's the very long and short fantasy baseball takeaway from my book, which I do not talk about in my book. The end.
Okay. That's important to know. Thank you for clarifying that. But what about this question? Do you think college will be free for my 3-year? Great pod, says Itor.
Yeah, thanks, Itor. No. Being in academia,
never.
This is for an entire another pod where we can talk about, as you talked about on your first day pod with MLB moving averages. No, universities are investment banks, basically, and there's not going to be free college.
Nope, not in this lifetime for damn sure, and maybe a couple lifetimes after that. It's only gotten more expensive over the last 40, 50 years. We all know the story there. Sorry, Richard. I would love for you to have some free college. I think that would be great, but this is reality, and unfortunately, me and Blair are living in it, and you are in reality with the, hey, it's Rico Palazzo Fantasy Baseball Podcast, which is on Twitter. Palazzo Podcast at protonmail.com is the email. Palazzo Podcast on Twitter, 2 L's and 2 Z's.
Utah, give me 2.
We have to close this segment by saying, Blair Williams, for love or money?
100% love. I mean, my phone background is love and be loved. I mean, when you're looking at it, it's I mean, money is a transient thing. You need to understand money to survive in the world. You need to understand love to survive as a human. And I mean that again, that's for your other pod, surviving in the world versus surviving as a human. One is tied to hope, and the other is tied to survival. You can guess which one.
Oh, that's fantastic! Thank you, Blair. For love or money closes out Enrico's Inquisition. It's in the can. Blair was very forthright with us. Man, we covered a lot in that segment. Wow, this is like is this even a fantasy baseball pod? I'm not so sure. Talking about all kinds of shit. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I won't have it any other way. This is what we do here. This is what we do, and it's who we are. Blair Williams. You can find him at Razzball, by the way. He's on Twitter at EverywhereBlair. And don't forget the Palazzo Invitational. Still has spots open. You can fill those spots by going to our Twitter bio. Click on the link and sign up. And you can compete for that big-ass trophy. Go for the gold. Take it. Never give up. Brock says, only caught the end, but that was great. Blair is awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks, you, Brock. Appreciate the kind words, Blair. It really means something. Brock and Blair. Those are two Brock and Blair. Blair and Brock.
And congratulations to Brock and I believe Maddie Wood and some other people I do not know at the FTN podcast for defeating the Razzball podcast in the Baseball Pods podcast tournament or whatever it's called.
Yeah. Baseball Pod's fantasy baseball bracketology thing. Yes. Yeah. We were defeated soundly yesterday by Bubba and Batflip Crazy Toby. So we're done. That was a good run. We expected to lose, and we should lose to them. They have, this is how it goes. You pay your dues, and they've paid their dues already. They're advanced. They've been around longer than they have, and they do great content. So by all of those factors alone, we have no business moving forward. So we salute them, and we wish them all the best. And we thank Chris for putting that on. He always does great work with that. He's trying to expose other podcasts, not just the ones that we already know. So thank you. Lots of love for the Razzball team from Brock. He's digging it. Matt Kupferly too. Yeah, that's right. From the FTN pod who defeated I didn't know, this is going to sound bad, I didn't know there was a Razzball pod.
That's the weird thing about Razzballs. They're not awesome on social media and like advertising stuff. And I mean, they have 2 different baseball pods. There's the Gray and Ralph Lifshitz pod. And then there's the Donkey Teeth and Bidon pod. So there's 2 of them. They don't like to advertise. They just do. Because as Rudy points out, is like we don't do our speaking on pods. We do our speaking with our tournament results.
Damn.
Ouch.
Well, yeah. I apologize to the whole Razzball community for not being more engaged with your podcast. That's something I need to rectify. So, I hope they'll forgive me. Maybe they won't. All right. Wow. Holy crap. I can't believe we've already been on for this long. This has been fascinating. Damn. Time flies when you listen to people who know what they're saying and have kind of a passion for what they're talking about. You can really get engrossed in conversations. And, as a former teacher, I should have a better grasp of time. I should always know what time it is and how much time I have to complete a task. Because when you're teaching, that's all you think about. You got to be like, all right, I got 90 minutes for this class and I got to get it done. And sometimes when we're doing these podcasts, especially with a guy like Blair, I just lose track of time. So that's my bad. I'll take responsibility for that. There's no Deary here either, so we're just kind of doing our own thing. I just kind of feel like we're hanging out somewhere in the middle of nowhere, having our own conversation, Blair. It's kind of cool.
I'm cool with that, however long you want to go.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to cut some things out here. We always do like a show rundown. I have all these ideas, and I want to get you on the record. So let's just skip ahead to Shine and Ride the Pine, because I love doing this segment because it also boosts up other people's projections. And I want to get you on the record because we're not going to have you back on before the season starts. I want to get some of these in the can. So what do you say to that, Blair?
Yeah, let's shine the pine, right?
Let's shine that pine. Yes. Get the old pine sol out. Rub it up. Get that pine shining. That's right. Shine and Ride the Pine is a game we play where I give a projection to our guest, and our guest decides whether or not they will shine it or they'll ride the pine on it. And since RotoFanatic now has their own projections available on rotofanatic.com, guess what? We're going to use those projections. What a shocker. Mind blown. What do you say, Blair? You ready for this or not?
Let's do it.
Woohoo! Okay. Go to rotofanatic.com. You can follow along by looking at the projections that we have available on our website. Crosby Spencer made them happen. Shout out to Crosby. He's my guy. Let's see what Crosby gives us. All right. First one, right off the bat. Alex Bregman. He's a Houston Astro. He's known as the number 2 overall pick in the MLB draft many moons ago, but he's also known for a cheating scandal involving trash cans. Kind of a bummer.
Mm-hmm.
But Crosby has him penciled in for 32 home runs this year. Shine or ride the pine on 32 bombs?
I already gave you the heads up that I'm, of course, comparing to Razzball because they know a lot more than I do. And I'm, not only doing that, but I'm comparing to Fangraphs.
But you also have your own instinct. You've been around. You know the game.
So I've got my instinct. I've got my screen over here. The thing about Alex Bregman, 32 bombs, I'm gonna ride the pine on that. And that was a big thinker. Honestly, it's a push. But if I had to choose, if I had to coin flip, I'm gonna ride the pine.
There are no pushes here, so it's at least 32 or more.
You gotta make a choice. So I'm gonna ride the pine on that. I'm gonna say under 32. Steamer has him at 32. Gray's got him at 29. And in the great spectrum of things, if you're the casual fantasy baseballer, sure, 32, that's fine. Yes. If you are the elite baseballer where 32 versus 29 matters. I mean, that's a 10% difference, right? Basically, 3.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a 10% difference. I'm going to go on the ride the pine on that because, Bregman wasn't nearly as stellar as he was last, I should say in 2020, minus the trash cans, wasn't as great as he could have been.
It was a short season, though. I mean, he was injured. Who cares?
No.
2020 is not indicative of who he is as a player, but
exactly.
But it was the first season post scandal, so
yeah. So honestly, speculation. I'm going to keep him under 32. I haven't been drafting Bregman. I'm not excited to draft him. I don't know a lot of people who are excited to draft him. He's more or less sort of that place like if you see him at value, you draft him. But I don't know of anybody who's like jumping out as the Bregman stand. And I'm going to let the social environment kind of manage that one right there.
We were talking about hype earlier in the show, Blair. Yes, there's no hype for Alex Bregman this year. It is long gone, as they say. It's too bad. I'm sorry, Mr. Bregman. I will tell you this. Doing the Triple Play podcast that I did the other day where we're breaking down our TGFBI drafts, one of the drafts, Bregman went as low as 55. Now, to me, that's a steal. That's a good deal. At 55, that is too low for a guy who could give you 30 home runs, hit 290, drive in 100-plus runs, score 100-plus runs. He could do everything except steals. I wouldn't expect a lot of steals from him, but 55 is nice value comparative to ADP. But I'm gonna join you. I'm gonna ride the pine out as well. That was a really tough one for me because Crosby's got me right at the barometer, the middle level there, and I couldn't decide myself. But I think he might hit 30 home runs, but that's not 32. So that's where I go with that. All right, let's try another one here. Oh, I forgot to ask you this earlier, Blair. This is the official fantasy baseball podcast of Russell Crowe. And
so it's every hand to his rope or gun? Quick's the word and sharp's the action. After all, surprise is on our side.
Master and Commander or Survivor? Which one do you prefer? I forgot to ask you that. I have to ask you that.
I mean, Survivor is pretty much garbage, but honestly, what better explanation of our culture than Survivor? I mean, just commodification of survival of the fittest. Whoever can do the dumbest things for the longest survives. I mean, so just by that, I'm going to go with Master and Commander.
Yes! Doug Ishikawa, take that. You're not going to like hearing that, but hey, that was the finest breakdown of Master and Commander versus Survivor that we have had yet. I love that. That was really well done. All right, let's try another one here because we're doing Shine or Ride the Pine. I don't want to mix up our segments. The audience could become confused. Mark Canha of the Oakland A's. You've heard of him? He's an outfielder. Yeah. He's there's some talk he might hit leadoff, but odds are it'll be Ramon Laureano. But he's come on the last couple of years and been a solid producer. Could we expect Mark Canha to have an OBP of 366 or better? 366.
366?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so I'm not going to pretend again like I have everything about the Oakland Athletics memorized. I'm pulling up his stats right now. OBP 2019, 396, 2020, 387, 15% walk rate, 2020, 13.5% walk rate, 2019, consistent K percentage, consistent BABIP, however we want to pronounce that. 366 OBP was what you gave me, right?
Shine around the pine.
I'm going to shine that. I mean, he's looking like he's exceeding that. The projections by every major projection has that as the under. But I mean, we're looking at consistent walk rate. And, my good buddy Cool Whip is messaging me right now with lots of suggestions. But I mean, we're looking at, honestly, I mean, I'm looking through his Fangraphs page right now, and I'm seeing a little bit of fluctuation in his power, but not necessarily fluctuation in how he approaches things. I mean, am I personally drafting Kenna as like anything? Very, very, very late. I can't say in whether a home league or a tournament league I have ever drafted him on purpose. I have never. But when we're looking at, I mean, basically positive weighted runs created plus since 2018 on, I'm not going to be angry at you if you take that late. I mean, we're looking at, again, especially if you're in OBP league, points leagues.
Yeah.
I won't be angry at you if you're taking him as your corner infielder. Yeah.
There you go. So you're going to shine this.
I'm shining that.
I'm going to join you on this shine. Mark Canha has a great value regardless. Particularly great in OBP and points leagues. He gets bumps. He gets on base, walks, has great plate discipline with his approach, as Blair mentioned. But I actually like him to maybe have his best year yet. If he's going to be hitting high up in that lineup and get the opportunity to do so, it could be a banner year for him in all phases except batting average. Don't rely on him so much for batting average, but everything else, I dig it. I like it. Give me some Mark Canha. Woohoo! We're talking with Blair Williams here in the Shine or Ride the Pine segment where we put it to him. We make decisions on projections. These projections are provided by rotofanatic.com. That's right. I am one of the owners of rotofanatic.com, so it's obvious I'm trying to push a product, but they've been created by Crosby Spencer. Make sure you follow Crosby on Twitter. Check him out. He's really, really smart when it comes to data analysis and deep, deep analytics, how to create your own spreadsheets, how to create your own formulas for expected stats. He's kind of a whiz. He's kind of a big deal, as they like to say. Let's see. How about this fella? Giancarlo Stanton. Yep. Giancarlo Stanton.
Over under 20 games, right?
Shit. Is this a pointless exercise then, since he's always hurt? Because is it really a matter of like how many games we will play more than any particular stat that he will produce?
I have him in a home league, so I'm somewhat invested in his incredible ability to smash a ball.
Well, what do you say then to 30 home runs? Shine or ride the pine?
I mean, I can look at my screen next to me as much as I like, and it's not going to help because do not draft, as Zitor says. Stanton, of course, has, let's put it out there for the podcast crew. 18 plus 23, that's 41 games that he's played in the past 2 years. Previous to that, he basically played 2 full years, 2017, 2018. What we're at this point is what you mean. We're all kind of peddling things. Gray says is a coin flip. The way he describes it as is like you have the projections of somebody. You need to take the person out of it and just put the projections in. If you look at the projections, absolutely sure. I'm looking over here and I see from the bat to the ATC to steamer, 39, 36, 37 home runs. I should say 39 from steamer. We're seeing home run productivity.
That's what Giancarlo Stanton does.
Yep. Can he stay healthy, which is something he has not shown to do? Am I Nostradamus? I'm not able to say that. Actually, of course, Cool Whip's texting me right now, and he's like, "Oh yeah, of course, Stanton's great." Cool Whip, yeah, he's got 200 followers. I don't know how anybody in the world is not following Cool Whip RB.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. I'm definitely following him. He knows that. Let's get that up. Let's get that up to 250 by the end of the weekend. Come on.
250 by the end of the weekend. It's like, am I Nostradamus? No, I'm not. I can't predict if somebody's going to be hurt, if somebody's going to be not able to perform at their full ability. Gets into, a full spectrum of pain and play. If he ends up on the positive side of being able to play and being able to get back to as I'm seeing in 2017, 2018, 700 plate appearances each of those years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, mind exploding. 700 plate appearances.
Yeah, they're like
experiences too. Like, I mean, that's stunning for a guy who I believe still holds the record for exit velocity. Absolutely, you can get into one of the 30s for home runs, and I would shine it. Am I able to say that he will be healthy? No, I'm not able to say that. So, if I were to say to the industry corner who's listening to this, people who are playing in the NFC, of course, invest at him in a reasonable amount. If you are a casual player in your home league or what have you, ESPN, Yahoo, make sure you're not overdrafting him, but at the same time, don't look at him as like the savior to your home run needs, because there are Anthony Santander's coming in later, Franmil Reyes is coming in later, who are half the draft capital of a Stanton, so to speak, who are going to produce just as well.
Absolutely. I'm going to shine this, believe it or not. I just believe that he can't be hurt forever. There will be a time in this world, in this realm, where Giancarlo Stanton will be healthy. And this could be that year. So that's all it is. It's just pure speculation on the fact that he can't be hurt perpetually for another year. That's it. So.
Yeah. And at a certain point, as fantasy baseballers, we got to trust that. Because humans perform. Humans heal. Humans get better.
Yeah.
We've all seen the back of a baseball card where we have a lost year or a lost 2 years or a lost 3 years. And right now at that point for Stanton, I think we're all flipping that coin, and I'm making coin flip motion for all you podcasters later. Does it land on healed or does it land on hurt? And that's the choice you got to make.
That's all it is.
Yep.
You know, Ken Griffey Jr. had that stretch where he was hurt for many years in a row. 2002, 70 games. 2003, 53 games. 2004, 83 games. And then in 2005, he was able to play in 128 games and give you 35 bombs. And you're like, all right, cool. He's back.
That's an exceptional comparison.
So, it's possible, but it could be one more year of injuries too. So that's where we're at with this guy right now. Just remember that you're rolling the dice, and like Blair said, don't put too much risk. Don't expose yourself so much that you don't have, a backup plan, or he should be like your backup plan, or maybe a double backup plan. So that's how I would look at that. Very cool. Good idea. Good call. I like that. I like the way your mind thinks, Blair. It's very radical. He's a radical dude. And we're talking about Shadow Ride the Pine. Our next victim is Nick Castellanos of the Cincinnati Reds. Cincinnati has a very pro-offensive stadium. That's a good way to put it. And with Nick Castellanos, you usually get batting average. So there's not really an issue there, but sometimes it doesn't come through. In 2021, Blair, can we expect Nick Castellanos to hit 292 or better this year?
292 or better? I think the first thing just to walk through, your listeners on the podcast and on the stream here is I'm scrolling down on Fangraphs.com and I'm going to his plate discipline. I'm looking at basically his 2018-2019 where he achieved that goal that you're talking about. Was it 282, correct?
292.
292. And then 2020 where he did not achieve that. And I'm trying to look at basically the discrepancies between the numbers between 2018, 2019, and 2020. And again, we all kind of forgive 2020 as, COVID and the delayed start, and in some. And, some people were also told, to bat differently. And I'm seeing Castellanos 2020 swinging strike rate 16.6, a full percent higher than it was in 2018, 3% higher than it was in 2020. That is, of course, unnerving. We're looking at a precipitous drop in his overall contact and his zone contact and, full-fledged contact, basically by a factor of 10 to 20% almost each year. That's not great. It doesn't get me excited. We scroll up and just kind of, I think it's sort of interesting ethnographically from my point of view to see, like, here's what I do when I look at this. Will he make 292? I see every major projectionist going ride the pine on that. I see his power maintaining. In fact, we could probably see really good power because his ISO has maintained, if not actually increased. It's increased by a factor of nearly 30% each year. Wow. That's actually wrong, 15% each year.
Okay, I was going to say, that would be pretty tough.
Yeah, 2018 to 2020, it's a factor of 30%. So we can see him sort of translating into a power hitter that hits for less average, but from 298 in 2018 to 289 2019 to 225 with kind of a substandard BABIP in 2020.
Yep.
For me, I'm going to ride the pine on that.
That was very well thought out, clear rationale behind all of your analysis there. But I'm going to shine it. I think that Nick Castellanos is going to have his finest year as a pro. This is the time. Everybody thought it was going to be last year. Only reason I'm saying this is because everybody thought it would be in 2020. When I say everybody, a lot of people out there with big mouths saying, hey, Nick Castellanos for MVP this year. He's with the Reds year one. It didn't go that way, but it might go away. It might go down this year. I'm not saying he'll be the MVP, but I think he can easily eclipse 292. If he hits 297, that's gold. So I'm taking it, shining it.
All right.
Yeah, why not? Let's have some dissension, some disagreement here,
That's
where
we make productivity.
Yeah, you want to start doing some hot takes, You take one side, I'll take the other. It doesn't matter what the question is.
I've got hot takes, you know that.
Oh, what a world we live in. It's media driven and we're all just trying to survive. All right, let's try another fella playing Major League Baseball. We're doing Shine or Ride the Pine. We're deciding whether we're going to shine and take the projection we're given or we're going to ride the pine. This is tough because, there's so many guys that we have looked at. I'm trying to avoid repetitive ones, but we've never done them with Blair either. So it's also a fresh take at the same time. That's a conundrum that I run into when we do these. So why don't we try a guy like Austin Meadows, the Tampa Bay Rays. His ADP dropped significantly from 2020 going into this 2021 season. Can we expect Austin Meadows to give us a 264 or better batting average this year?
I know you talked to Yancey about Austin.
Yancey!
Yep. Yep. Mr. Yance soft ice cream. And that's a great story behind that. I'm surprised you did not ask him about the soft ice cream.
I did. I missed that one.
The worst insult leveled upon a human being in the history of insults.
Wow.
He was, of course, called soft ice cream. Yeah, I know you talked about your favorite Tampa Bay Rays with Mr. Mayor of Fantasy Baseball, Yancey Eden. And Austin Meadows, I believe, was a shine for him, if I remember correctly. So again, I'm going to move down just to kind of discuss with your podcast listeners. I'm taking sort of the fan graphs. I'm looking at his plate discipline. I'm seeing contact percent reduced year upon year. I'm seeing his swing strike rate increase. 2018, 7%, 8.9%, 2019, 12.5%, 2020. I'm seeing his swing percentage increase 4% from 2019 to 2020. So what I'm reading and just kind of describing to you as, an amateur projectionist again, I'm seeing him swinging more, missing more, and making less contact. So when I'm looking at sort of the consensus projections, and you gave me, I believe, in the 260s, correct, Michael?
264.
264. I'm going to ride the pine on that.
Wow. I'm surprised. I'm going to shine it. I got to shine it.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like he's a better player than 264 hitter. And I'm dismissing 2020. I'm throwing it out. I'm throwing out the rule book and saying, don't worry about 2020. What I saw in 2019 is what I like. But you also just described a reduction in contact. That does give me pause.
Yeah, I think this speaks more broadly, not just to projections of RotoFanatic, but projections as a whole. Is that ultimately we're it's like predicting the weather, right? We have a fair idea, and this is what I described. Just speaking of Raz Slam, like we're projecting people for a bell curve, and for your visual viewers, I'm making a sort of a lump shape with my hands right now. And if you don't know what a bell curve is on the podcast, you can look it up. Where they should be, and there's of course where they possibly could be as well, bad and good. We saw Austin Meadows 287 in 2018, 291 in 2019, and 205 batting average in 2020. His strikeout percentage jumped 10% in 2020, and again, 2020 was an awful year. Everybody. 2020 has been a huge debate amongst projectionists. What do we do with that? Do I get the pay grade to figure that out? No, I don't get the pay grade of that. Like I said before, I'm not a data guy. I am, however, a community guy. And if I'm going to be saying to your average Yahoo ESPN player, do I go average of 260 on Austin Meadows? I do not. If I am talking to your NFBC main event player, I'm looking at the projections being knocking on the door. But I am looking at that 32% K percentage in 2020. And I am going to say, even to your NFBC players, ride the pine. Not only the pine, but the pine.
The decline of the pine. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there it is. Blair has spoken. He has made his point clear. That is how it's done. That is shine or ride the pine. Blair, that was incredible. Thank you so much. This has been It's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm so glad we finally got to get the mannerisms, the real person that is you before me. I wonder if one day we'll meet up in the Midwest somewhere and, hang out. I wonder if that'll ever happen.
Yeah, we can go to Wisconsin Dells and, enjoy a water park together.
Wisconsin Dells. I have no idea what that is.
It's a bunch of water parks.
Oh, that's a classic Midwest thing to do. Go to the old water park. We got Soak City over in Cedar Point. You ever been to Cedar Point?
No, I unfortunately, I've never been to Michigan, but my adopted grandparents have a cabin right next to the UP, and I hope to one day cross the border.
Well, Cedar Point's in Ohio, technically, but that's good to know. I can't believe you've never been to Michigan. We'll have to rectify that and make that a reality, because Michigan, although it has its problems and issues, it's a lovely state physically. I will say that. A lot of great views, especially the UP, Mackinac Bridge, Mackinac Island. A lot of fun stuff up there. Going up there in the summertime, going up north that's what you did. That's what you do here, Michigan. They still do it every year. Cruise up old I-75, jam up the freeways, and go up north. So I want to thank Blair so much for having the time and energy to stay on the show and do this with me. Not an easy thing to do. He's a busy man. You probably have no idea how busy Blair really is and like how much stuff he has going on. So the fact that he gave us some of his time like this, I do not take that lightly. And we thank you for being on the live stream. All the commenters like Richard Zito and John Fish, Zach Nelson, all you guys were commenting. Brock, that was very cool. Thank you for being an interactive part of the show with me and Blair. Blair, this is your final chance to say whatever you want to say right now before we close the show. Get it all on the record.
Is this where I get mad?
You can get mad if you want to, or you can just promote yourself. You can do whatever you want. This is your final This is your final moment on this show.
In the draft of the list of things we're going to talk about, this is where you told me to get mad, and of course, it's like I adopt the Hulk stance of Mark Ruffalo, where I'm mad all the time.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
It just doesn't appear that way. It's like you got to be angry at everything at some point. That's just the life of a teacher. First and foremost, love and be loved. You gotta take care of everybody. Second, if you're in the fantasy sports community, baseball, fantasy football, fantasy basketball, apparently there are fantasy hockey players. You got to take care of your other people. Again, just transform that love and be loved and take care of your community, because the 12, 14, 15 people you're in your league with, you got to take care of. So if you're in the fantasy community, support everybody. And here's my controversial mad take. The fantasy community needs to stop being so commodified. We cannot just look at return on investment of fantasy leagues as the success rate of fantasy sports. We have to look at creators creating for the sake of art, period. There's so much debate right now about people being ranked on their return on investment and their worth as a fantasy community member on how much money they make. And I don't think that's where the community originated. And I don't think necessarily that's where the community should be going, because part of this is we're playing a game, right? We're all imagining to be sports managers. We're all doing a proxy of enjoying our favorite sport, whether it be baseball, basketball, football, soccer, what have you. We're all pretending to be a manager of some sort. Commodification, that is money coming in to determine who is good at something and who is not good at something, commodification has sort of re-ranked us all and created a value system of who we are. And suddenly our value into the fantasy community is created by how much money we make. Let's not do that as much, if not at all. Let's enjoy the game. Let's enjoy the fun. Let's enjoy the community. Let's enjoy the diversity. Because it's through that that allows us to become a better community, a more diverse and a bigger community, and we can have more fun with the game beyond just as a side hustle. The end.
Well, that was very poignant. Thank you, Blair. Does that mean people who are trying to turn their creative efforts, whether it's podcasts, writing, whatever the output is, the number one priority of it should not be to make money. It should be to, connect, engage, have discourse, various things like that. That's what you're saying?
What would NoFX say?
They're doing it for the cause. I know that's what they would say.
Yep. You're not doing it for the sustenance, right? And there are corners of the fantasy sports community that do it because it's Wu-Tang or because it's NoFX or because it's, the community. Because what you do is you're locked in an apartment with a couple people and you love doing this for free.
Yeah.
There's also the commodification where people are doing this as a living. That is what it is, and I'm not going to put a valuation on that. But at the same time, coming from that background of both punk and academia, I'm going to say the reason I do it is because of the community, not because of the money.
Beautiful. Well, I mean, that's a sentiment that kind of is at the heart of the United States. It always has been. People making this decision, trying to do things for the spirit of it, the nature of it, the natural feel of what it inspires them to be, and then the people who want to commodify things and they want to maximize their value. They believe my time is worth money and I'm not going to give my time unless I'm compensated properly. That's part of the American way. It's always been that way too. So I find that your overall kind of point in your rant there, which was very well done, is at the heart of most things. It's really at the crux of what it is to be, a part of the United States. It always has been, always will be, and it won't stop tomorrow, and we will never resolve it, most likely. But I still appreciate you being honest and forthright and kind of putting yourself out there. I commend you for that. We don't make squat doing this podcast. There's no income for this. I do this because I spent a lot of my life kind of being not afraid, but a lack of desire to be a focal point. I was like, what's so special about me, or why should I try to get people to look at me or listen to what I have to say? I thought that was like, it was egotistical. I thought there was a lot of arrogance involved in that, and a lot of like me, and there is some of that probably, and definitely there is some of that in these types of endeavors, whether you're doing a podcast or you're trying to do a stream. However you are presenting yourself for the public to consume you in a certain way, regardless if you get paid for it or not. So what I'm giving is my time and energy and myself to this. I decided a couple of years ago to stop being so filled with like shame and guilt and be like, I'm not, why am I special? There's nothing about me that I should, think is unique and I should just go with the flow and not try to rock the boat and just, be grateful that I get to live another day on this earth. And I decided instead to, if I have certain talents and abilities that I think are valuable or provide people with some type of joy or thoughts, makes them think, then why should I not at least try to share that? Or why should I not call my shot? Why should I not go out there and say, hey, you know what? I'm worth something and I have something to offer and I'd like to share that. And I'd like to see if other people find some type of similarity. They find some common ground with me. So that's what I started to do. I just was going to do. It's really about doing. That's all it was. I just started doing one day. And I made it sound maybe more eloquent than it really was. I just said, you know what? Let's just start doing. I'm going to say do. And that's all I do now is I do. And if there's a response to it, if it leads to things like this moment we're having right now where you and I are discussing whatever the hell we're discussing right now at 1:30 in the morning, then I think that's a benefit. And I don't know if it's a benefit to someone else or not. I can only kind of comment from my own point of view. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I certainly am not commodifying this in any way. I just wanted to see how far I could take things. So that's what I'm on right now is a journey. I'm trying to see how far I can take this experience. And wherever that leads me, I have no idea. There is no destination. So I don't know what any of that means, but that's kind of just how I feel when you said that. I'm responding to what you're saying.
Absolutely. And I hope it doesn't come off that I'm saying that you're commodifying anything.
No, not at all. Hell no. No, fuck no. That is not even
in particularly, it's the DKs and the FDs of the fantasy sports world that, have made fantasy sports so transactional by the dime, quarter, dollar, $5, $10, $20.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I didn't take it towards me at all, clearly, because we don't do shit here. we just create, and that's it. Me and Deary are 15, 16-year-old friends. We've known each other for a long time, and we said, hey, let's start potting, and that's it. So I get what you're saying. I respect what you're saying, too. At the same time, I also see a value, to people doing something that people enjoy. And if you can make a career out of something that you enjoy, I don't have a problem with that. And I know you don't have a problem with that either. I think you're just talking about the epicenter, the focus of what we're doing here as an overall community. You're talking from a community perspective, I believe. And I think that's a sentiment that is very valuable. So,
I mean, absolutely. And I don't want to elongate this any longer than it has to be. But as an academic, I look at baseball communities. And fantasy baseball is a way to celebrate baseball, enjoy baseball, and participate vicariously. And to me, coming from sort of the era of where we submitted original fantasy baseball lineups by mail, and we scored them by newspaper, to see that there are large venture capital producing enterprises running off of cryptocurrency akin ventures coming into fantasy sports, redefining not only what sports is but mementos. To me, that's a little bit worrisome to the community, and the community needs to think about that as a whole. And it's one of those things that when we think about data democratization, whether you're working with Crosby Spencer or Rudy Gamble, what happens when we already have seen NBA Top Shot take moments and assign them to crypto tokens? You're not that old. I'm 39. We've already seen NBA take their highlights and assign them to tokens. What happens when MLB possibly takes all their data and makes it proprietary, and there's no longer data democratization? how does the fantasy sports community play then?
What? Yeah, that's a really, really great point to end on there. I will think about that. I think everybody should think about that because we take it for granted. The ease of access of information when it comes to like baseball data, it's pretty easy to get. There's people pay for subscriptions. Hell, Razzball has a subscription, for more access that kind of analyzes the data beyond itself. But the actual data, you can go to MLB, you can go to Baseball Savant, and you can go apeshit on Baseball Savant. Yeah. And there's no barrier.
Yep.
So that's coming. It's probably coming. Hate to say it. It's probably coming. And that sucks.
But I mean, when it comes around to it, and this isn't like trying to, stroke your ego or anything, but you, Michael Govier and Chris Deary, wherever you are going to be, kind of seen as the quote unquote 2020s punks in the sense that you're doing it yourself. You're creating when other people are commodifying, and you are trying to build community when other people are trying to rank and, basically make a hierarchy. And ultimately, if you take one thing away from the past 2.5 hours that we spent, it's that I enjoy what you are creating and you are doing, Mr. Govier, former social studies teacher, an occasional punk listener, an occasional bassist and drummer. And what you're doing is you're taking something and you're making art out of it. And ultimately, hopefully, as humans, that's what we are art creators. And if we can all at least, do our best to artify fantasy baseball, I would be super happy with that. And if we make some money off of it, screw the system. Here we go.
Well, that sounds great. I'm all for all that. Let's do it. I like creating, and I like money too. So, because money can sustain opportunity and freedom. There's no doubt about that. So let's not, we ask the love or money question on the show every time we have someone on, and we mean that because we really do want to know. And people, 8 out of 10, it's always been love. There's occasional money person, but money does equal things that allow a life better lived. But it can't be everything. If it's the sole focus of your life, I've just been there. I know that you have to do things because you have a passion for them. And if there is people who will give you a monetary reward for doing so, then you'll get that. It'll come with it. But don't have that be your focus. I've seen too many people on YouTube and all these creators and all the people that have been somewhat happy with what they've created from scratch. It was all because they had a central focus on an original idea, and they just harnessed it and they built it and they went to town on it. And that's how they were able to end up at a place where money was given to them because people didn't want to have a day without their content, what they offered them. They're like, I got to have this in my life. So money's just the bonus in the end. People got to remember that. I don't know more than anybody else. I think Blair would say the same thing. We're just a couple of dudes. What do we know? We don't know shit more than what we've experienced in our own lives and could read about as much as you could read about. So just remember that going forward. Fantasy baseball is a lot of fun. It's just a game. I never take it too seriously. That's the key thing, Blair. I mean, you're making some great points and some serious points, but none of this is serious to me overall. It's just something to kind of connect with you on, have some laughs. It's a jumping off point for me. I do love baseball. It's fun, but if I took it so seriously where I didn't enjoy it, then I would not want to be a part of it.
Yeah. And, if there's anybody out there who's feeling like you've not done well in fantasy baseball and you feel like you're excluded, keep at it. And if you like the game, it's a great game. And honestly, it's provided me some of the best vicarious relationships in my life. Sometimes you talk to these co-managers in your leagues more than you talk to your family, and you share experiences. And ultimately, there are people in my home league that started in 2008, random ESPN league. I've gone to Twins games with them, friends with them on Facebook, friends with them on Twitter, and one person I've even brought on to Razzball, and like these things have consequences years down the road. And I know there's a community that lost a person today to who died. I don't know the circumstances behind it, but obviously it impacted that community very well. And I sympathize with that, and I empathize with that, because not only have we, in my home league, have we lost people, not only through health or communication, but it's like you become friends with these people and you become family with these people.
That's beautiful. That's a great sentiment to wrap up the show on. Blair Williams has been joining us from Razzball. Don't forget, you can read him at Everywhere Blair whenever he types something to be written. But you can also read him at Razzball, right?
Yep. Everywhere Blair at Razzball, and baseball, football, and basketball.
Oh, wow. Okay. See, I don't even know that part. I learned so much today from Blair. This was it's kind of a different episode. We talked about a lot of different stuff. Sometimes these things just take a natural course, and we allow it to have natural conversations on the show. And I'm always going to be down with that. And I want to thank Blair for his contributions and for being a reasonable human being. I always dig that. Don't forget that the Palazzo Invitational still has some spots left in the final league. Go to our Twitter bio, click on the link, and sign up right now at Palazzo Podcast on Twitter. 2 L's, 2 Z's.
Utah.
You can send us an email, PalazzoPodcast@protonmail.com, and you can follow us on Facebook as well. We also have a Facebook page. All of our live streams are available on YouTube. You can go to our YouTube channel by, once again, going to the Palazzo Podcast Twitter handle. Click on the YouTube link. It's right there in the bio. Palazzo Podcast. 2 L's, 2 Z's.
Utah.
How many times do I have to say it? Thank you to everybody who participated in the show. We'll see you guys next time. Don't forget, Godspeed, everyone.